Okay, so I'm going to carry on with question 3 from the conservation of mass, and this is actually going to start to look at some mathematical manipulation now. And what we are told in the question is that the student has started with 53 grams of sodium carbonate, and we know that the sodium carbonate is going to produce a mass of sodium oxide and also a mass of carbon dioxide. And the way we can do that, there's two ways we can do this. We can go into a full moles mass RFM type calculation and calculate a number of moles, or we can look at a kind of ratio of the mass to the RFM. And hopefully what you can see is the 106 is the RFM of the sodium carbonate that we're talking about. And hopefully you can see, or you'll be able to work out, that 53 is half of 106. And so when we have ratios of numbers like this, what we can see is if we've used in the previous question, we calculated that the molecular mass of sodium oxide must have been 62, and we were told that the mass of carbon dioxide must have been 44, then the product, if they were to follow the law of conservation of mass, will follow a same mathematical ratio as all of the other numbers in that equation, because that's the way the maths would allow the equation to work. So we know that if the RFM of 106 was for sodium oxide and we had half as much mass, then using that same methodology, a ratio of a half would actually be the same for carbon dioxide as well. And so we would have half of the carbon dioxide produced. So we'd have 22 grams of carbon dioxide. The longer way of doing it would have been to actually calculate these values, because sometimes they're not always nice looking numbers. And so we'd have had 53 over 106 equals 0.5. We would have then multiplied that by 44, which is ultimately what we've kind of done in front of just doing it in a little bit of a shorter-hand way of doing it anyway. But ultimately, that's the calculation that we would have done. And so by also doing that, we can then use that law of conservation of mass to know that if we started with 53 grams of sodium carbonate, and we produced 22 grams of carbon dioxide, what must this unknown mass have been? And so again, a number of ways we can now do this. The question is asking us to use the law of conservation of mass, so we know that 53 is equal to a number plus 22. So that number must be 31. So relatively straightforward maths. But using the same methodology as the previous question, we knew 53 was half of 106. We calculated that 22 was half of 44. And by the same methodology, we've just calculated 31, which is now coincidentally, but not really, half of 62. So we've got a number of different ways to work out that 31 looks like it's the correct answer, and indeed it is.